Something serious is currently happening in the United States.
Tonight at University of Texas Austin, police one by one detaining pro-Palestinian protesters. More than 1,000 people have been arrested since the demonstrations across college campuses against the war in Gaza began.
Across the nation and around the clock.
Nearly 2,000 people so far have been arrested over the past few weeks at dozens of schools.
There were 119 arrested from Colombia, but they do not know how many of them are students and how many of them are non-students. We need to kind of understand where that is going.
Well, it is just a very complicated situation, but that is exactly where the question of freedom comes in. Is freedom about our own personal safety or the safety of everyone around us? Who is to blame? The police, the citizens, or the government? Now, after seeing all of that, here are some questions that I really have to ask. Is there absolute freedom in the world? How free are you? Are you really free, or is it just in your mind? Recently, there are lots of protests happening across universities in the United States calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and for the government to stop funding the war in Gaza. I feel like what is happening in the United States right now, if it was happening in China, the US would probably sanction China, and there will be so many thousands of videos here on YouTube saying, oh, China is bad, or many people call the Chinese government to stand down or not harm the protesters. But now tables have turned. No one can point fingers. Many people are not talking about it. Probably because it is the United States and it is not China. If that was China, many people would say, oh, death to China. China is not the best. But then, what are we really doing? So, I've always made many videos about China in the past. And most times when I talk about freedom in China or safety in China, some groups of people will come to the comment section and say, China is nothing like that. Or I should go to the streets and try to protest against the government, or just shout and just say I don't like the government of China, or just say things which are not good and see what will happen to me. But then looking at everything happening in many countries around the world right now, I think the problem we have is not a China problem. The truth is that China is not perfect. It's not a perfect place. It's got its flaws and downsides, of course, but it is nowhere near what the media makes it to be. But then when we make videos sharing our real life experiences in China and talk about a realistic overview of what we have experienced in China, many people still seem to not want to listen or open their minds to learning new things. So that's the reason why when I saw what is happening right now in the United States and of course in many countries around the world, I had to revisit this topic to ask if we really do have freedom worldwide. Because many times when I make videos in China, people say, oh, you can't say anything in China, you can't go out and say what the government doesn't want you to say. Does it mean in the US right now, the students who are protesting and saying things that the government doesn't want them to say and are getting arrested, do they have rights? Are they free? Are we really free, or are we just free in our minds? I ask again. Now, I'm not Chinese, I'm not American, but I'm just sharing my own personal point of view as a citizen of the world. When we look at freedom right now, are our governments looking out for us, or are they making decisions to please their political aspirations or the corporations that sponsor these governments? These are the real questions that we need to be asking ourselves, because we need to analyze if we are really free to say and do whatever we want, wherever and whenever we want to do it. We can say there is freedom of speech, but is there freedom after speech anywhere in the world? Well, let me not keep talking so much. Now, here's a backstory to the current situation happening in the United States. For the past weeks, there have been mounting pro-Palestinian protests across universities in the United States, and many students and citizens have been arrested in the campuses, just like in the University of Texas, and many others have been pepper sprayed by the police on campus and of course off campus. Camps have been dismantled, and there have been serious back and forth pushing between the protesters and the police. And even in the University of California, for example, hundreds of police were sent out to dismantle any protests and camps calling for a divestment from helping Israel in favor of Palestine. Again, tear gas has been used, batons, and so much more. At the University of Columbia again, for example, many students still went out to protest despite an order to disband the protest or face a suspension. I'm sure you guessed it, many of them have been arrested. According to Reuters, dozens of loud explosions were heard during the clash, and flashbang charges and stun grenades were fired by the police, and Reuters even further reported that members of the pro-Palestinian group said fireworks were thrown at them and they were even beaten with bats and sticks. Both students and outsiders have been arrested, and of course many of them will be charged with criminal trespass and resisting arrest, including destruction of university and state property. Now, is this really the type of freedom that we all want? Putting people's lives at risk, is that the kind of freedom that we really want? It should be recalled that the US President Joe Biden recently signed into law a $94 billion foreign funding bill that includes military aid to Israel, Ukraine, and Taiwan, and has been supporting Israel for quite some time now. Of course, to the disdain of many US citizens who seem to be furious about where their taxpayers' dollars are going to. Now, like I said before, I'm not Chinese, neither am I American, and I believe situations like this can happen anywhere in the world. There are times when people want things differently from what the government wants, and when situations like this happen, it's good to point them out. But then when people choose to point fingers at one country and not point fingers at another country, then what are we really doing? Now guys, in one of my previous videos, I said I believe freedom is relative, and most of you in the comments even said freedom depends on every society and it is closely linked to public safety and of course universal benefits for everyone. Freedom is not just for you alone. That's the reason why I believe freedom is not about me. Freedom is about we. Freedom is about the safety of everyone. And China on its part isn't perfect, neither is any country globally. Everyone is striving for a better and safe society collectively, because the truth is that freedom isn't just about one person, like I've mentioned already, because if I say I want to be free at the detriment of my neighbor, then what kind of freedom is that? The truth is that China has had its past issues, just like every other country has had issues too. But the problem is that many people still seem to not want to accept how far China has come and accept the changes that China has experienced and the current China today. Most of the people still want to maintain the old narratives of China. It's just like saying I should maintain the old narratives of the United States, which is really contradictory. Now, during my time living here in China and flying across continents, of course, to come to China and traveling across China, and speaking to many different people from different ethnicities, I've realized that there are steps that our governments need to take in order to help us all achieve universal freedom. And the truth is that whether we like it or not, freedom is closely pegged to the safety of everyone, not just ourselves. And when we talk about everyone, it means our neighbors. And when we talk about neighbors, we mean even the neighboring countries. Now, when people talk about freedom in China and compare the freedom in China to the types of freedom practiced in the United States, I feel like the analyses are flawed, because to better analyze freedom types, we need to look at the cultural types, the cultural values. The truth is that we really can't compare the Western culture to the Asian or the African culture, and we shouldn't expect everyone to follow the Western culture as the standards for freedom. So that's why when I see many people saying that, oh, these people are not free and these people are free, what do we really mean? I think we need to look at tolerance and understand what works for everyone and every society. And I believe that in every situation, there's something positive we can learn from every culture to be able to develop our own personal freedoms. Because at the end of the day, we can learn from each other. Now, every country has issues, but why do some people always point fingers at one country for any little situation that occurs and sit quiet when far worse happens in another country? Personally, my aim is not to support any particular country, not the United States, not China, not even my home country, but to just point out that what we all feel or see as freedom might be just in our minds, and there's no perfect freedom anywhere. Just like one of our subscribers on this channel said a while back, freedom is to be able to have a safe environment for myself, my family, and of course my neighbor. And I believe the subscriber, when he was talking about my neighbor, it doesn't necessarily mean your next door neighbor, but probably everyone in the world, because whether we like it or not, we are all neighbors to each other and we are all part of the world. So if one problem is happening in one country, it can definitely affect us all. It doesn't matter whether you live in America, in Europe, Africa, Asia, or Australia. Hopefully, the situation in the United States can be handled amicably without much harm and loss of life, and everyone can be safe everywhere. There's already so much trouble in the world to be fighting wars every single day. Hopefully, it can definitely get better. And by the way, guys, this video might have used the US and China as a case study, but I believe it applies to every country because we are all human. We all have similar wants. We all have similar desires. And when situations like this happen, we can just learn from them and, of course, make the world a better place. At the end of the day, there's no absolute freedom, but we can all strive for freedom and hope that it can work out for everyone everywhere. It doesn't matter what kind of culture we practice or religion. So for those always pointing fingers and saying China is not free, or China is not safe, or China is like this or like that, or China is bad or scary, I just have to say that look at the world. Don't just look at China alone. Look at the whole world. No country is perfect. I'm sure not even your country. So we just hope that everyone can keep an open mind and understand the reality of the world when it comes to freedom. Thank you so much for watching this video. Feel free to like the video so more people can see to understand the reality of freedom. Subscribe to this channel for more videos like this weekly. Remember, this is Willene. See you next time.